here's something interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, here's a this is a thought that present deliberation again.
Yeah.
Just mind blows. The greatest gift giving is anonymous.
Yes.
So that to me seems it doesn't seem self-evident, but it seems plausible at least. And there's almost all the religions tend to agree on that.
Totally.
So maybe, you know how there are proofs of God and then there are problems. I think you can probably prove God to yourself personally. But I think the reason there doesn't exist a proof of God is that existence itself is such a gift. Like, this is a gift. This is a gift. Talking to you is a gift.
Yes.
This is a gift. Just breathing is a gift.
Yeah.
Somehow even suffering is a gift, which is so controversial.
Yeah.
Someone said that the God wouldn't sentence the devil to die for eternity because that's a gift. Even being alive and suffering is more of a gift than not existing.
I love that.
So somehow existence itself is a gift, and the greatest gift of all is given anonymously. So God by nature has designed this such that you cannot prove he did it, because if you prove he did it, that's like finding, you donated and you're like, I did it anonymously, but you find the receipt somewhere. So by its nature, you have to come to the conclusion, because it's such a gift, it's the greatest gift. I gave it to you anonymously. You can curse my name and I will still give you life.
That's amazing.
I will still give Sam Harris the best life.
I was just thinking that when you said that.
Even if he curses me and gets many people riled up and causes suffering, I'm sorry, you're still given existence.
Yes.
And I will not come down from the clouds and say and announce myself. And even that you can doubt. So no matter what, I will give you the gift of doubting too.
That's amazing. Yeah, God lacks ego.
Yes, lacks so much ego that he contrived this in such a way that you cannot prove him, because to prove him would be that this gift was not given anonymously, and that's the greatest gift of all.
That's beautiful.
Present deliberation.
That's amazing. Yeah, absolutely. At all of this. Do you think, and this is getting into more mystical thought, but like kind of the Alan Watts.
This was not mystical already. Yeah.
I love this because I think also you get into some of this stuff in the show, but I think it'll show parts of you where sure. But Alan Watts, like, is there something about, are we sort of fractals of a larger universe? Sort of, are we a way for God to observe him or her itself? And is there something about the human, the individual human, that is a sort of a pinched node or a fractal of something much larger? Or am I trying to think in too perfect of terms?
There are so many words that echo that, like the eye that we see through is the way that God sees us, or the same eye. So I think Meister Eckhart said that.
Oh, cool.
And then Schopenhauer said that we're all eyes of the same tree that are just branched off. And I tend to think, I used to like those ideas and I still like them. They're fun. But now I see that I'm so countercultural, and I formulate opinions based on being the devil's advocate.
Yeah.
So I see it now as a fad to think so mystically.
Yes.
And I'm like, wow, it's come to the point where the realist position is the controversial one.
Yeah.
And then I wonder, this is something I brought up to Wolfgang. So we tend to think in terms of a hierarchy, like there's too much of a literal interpretation of the Bible and religious stories and so on. And then you can get a bit esoteric and then much more mystical. And we tend to think the bottom is the literal, but I wonder how much more can you go down? Maybe it's not that we need to go up, or maybe it's both, but is there something that's more literal than the literal? Is there something that's more real than the real? And this is where Jonathan Pajot gave me an insight, where he said that the blades of grass in heaven are too sharp for man. I just thought, oh man, like I can think about that I will be thinking about that for months and months. That's interesting, because the way that I'm so influenced by the Eastern thought, the Vedic tradition, which says that this is somehow illusory. This people love, and I think the tendency for us to love illusoriness is actually a self-loathing. Yeah, I don't think that it's a search for knowledge. I also don't think I'm a truth seeker. I'm not a truth seeker. I think I'm a selfish person who's just curious. Yeah, and just can't help himself here and there. And I'm craven, and I'm ugly, and I'm not courageous, and I'm an invertebrate, and I'm gutless, like I'm a coward. I am, because I know what I'm afraid of. There's some truths that are frightening, and I know that.
I think the fact that you recognize that shows that it's your fate that you are gonna not be that. Like you're working against it. Because most people never recognize.
There was like the past year or so, where there was so much like this. Speaking about these subjects would provoke so much anxiety in me. It'd be so tough to do. I had to back off from the UFO subject for the same reason.
The UFO subject
stuff. Yeah. Geez. Like if you think about the possibilities, like truly think about them, it can put you into some dark places that it seems inescapable. You can put yourself into a place that's, I don't think that's true, but you can convince yourself temporarily that you're in a place that's inescapable. I do think that there's something like God is always with you. And I say this as someone who's like, I'm not even a believer. I'm like someone who's entertains believing or hopes to believe, but also hopes to not believe. Like if I pray, like it's praying for faith, but also not faith. Like I'm afraid of God. I'm extremely afraid of what it means that God exists. I'm extremely afraid of what it means that God doesn't exist. I'm fearful at both ends. Anyhow, so I don't think God ever, so these are all, if there's a God, but by the way, even that statement is like, that's a controversial statement. I can get to why, but well, anyway, that God will never leave you. Like you can see sometimes we have these stories, we listen to songs like I'm alone and so on and so on. I don't think you're ever alone. I think there's always hope. There's always hope. Either ask for it, like especially for psychological, like for being physically tortured and so on, or you don't have enough money and you pray and then you say, well, God doesn't help because I'm not any richer or any less in torment and so on. That's different than psychological torment. I think I think psychologically prayer is super helpful, at least for a large subset of people.
Fully agree.
And God answers or God listens, and you can even pray for God. If you're helping, can you show me how you're helping? Like help me recognize that you're helping.
Yes. And I think about the myth of Pandora's box, and we got all these sort of horrible maladies that plague the earth. Channel. There you go, Pandora's box.
Yeah, that's what it feels like, man.
Yes, but the one thing that we have is we always have hope. You know, that was the thing in the box.
Man. Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes.
That's interesting.
Yes. Yeah.
So Roseanne, the comedian, she's like, I hate hope. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And I know so many, I used to be like that too. Like, why would you ever give someone hope? Because you're disappointed. I'd say rather get extremely callous yourself to the disappointment. Hope is wonderful. It's great to look forward and be excited. I love the thrill of looking up to something more than I dislike getting disappointed by that.
Yes.
So that is, put out your hand and trust, even if you're going to get hurt.
Yes.
And just feel like, okay, you know what? It's better to put my hand out and trust, even if I've been hurt before, and be like, please don't hurt me. Please don't hurt me. I'm going to trust you.
Yeah.
Actually, that's another, there's a concept called collective illusions. That I think is so integral to the whole stigma of UFOs. Collective illusions are behaviors that we engage in publicly that contradict our privately held beliefs because we think you think the same. Because said another way, we act in a certain way in public because I think that you agree with that behavior or believe that same belief, but we actually all have some other shared belief privately. So for instance, in the 1960s, most Southerners were against segregation, but they thought their neighbors were for it. So they're like, I'm for it. And then everyone just became for it. So it's like this collective illusion.
Yes.
And then another one is the trustworthiness of society. We think of ourselves as we think society is untrustworthy, but it turns out there are tests. Most people are fairly trustworthy. It's something like 60% of people give deception. So 40% of people are honest, something like that. And some tests where you put money down or like a wallet and you see if they return it and so on. And another collective illusion, maybe the stigma. We think there's a stigma. This is why I contend the idea that we have a stigma in ufology. I don't think we have a stigma problem. I think we have a cowardice problem.
Yeah.
Because many math and physics professors come to me after a show about math and physics and will be like, okay, now that we've talked about that, like, what do you think is going on with UFOs? And like, these are like, I don't want to give it away because these are people who have
trust in you,
and awards and so on. These aren't just
sure.
People from the periphery.
Yep.
And additionally, the 2017 article on UFOs, people were like, I want to know more. I want to know more. We think there's a stigma, so we don't talk about it. But actually, privately, everyone wants to talk about it. Yeah. So it's a collective illusion that there's a stigma. Another collective illusion is that we think is that wealth and wealth and status is what matters most. So we think that to other people, wealth and status matter most. But it turns out when you ask people in surveys, private surveys, and you can check for honesty and also look at how they behave, they value family and safety and security and so on. And we all tend to agree on this privately. And then this research by this guy named Todd Rose said collective illusions are so deleterious to society, not just in their current generation, but mainly to the next, because the lies of this generation become the truths of the next. So now kids hear, oh, what people value is wealth and status. So now they're on Instagram and that's what they see, even though it's based on it's sand, it's pillars of sand.
Yeah, they really beget their own reality. And and I think of, like this Timur Quran, like preference falsification, where you know,
that's another way of saying it. Right?
You sort of say you want something out of virtue or out of pure mimesis of the people you're sort of around, and then underneath it, you definitely don't. And I agree, either that becomes this cargo cult belief system for the next generation, or because it is sort of somewhat illusory and kind of inauthentic on an individual level, at least, and concealed, it sort of comes crashing down quickly, and it sort of reverses. And I wonder if that's the case with the UFO thing, where, I mean, that's news to me and incredible to hear that there are like top academics who are like privately interested in this. And maybe if reality on some level is sort of a collective illusion, and we are sort of begetting a lot of what we see, you know, with our belief systems, there's this concept, sort of this like occult concept of like the egregore, and it's like a self-manifesting thought. And so I think of the UFO as like a possible self-manifest, like it's like collectively it feels like we are just moving in that sort of direction, and Jung would say that it represents.
I was about to say that
the mandala, the Sanskrit cycle of symbol of psychic completeness, and so maybe there's a way in which, and I think about this is going to get into really trippy, weird territory, but I think about our UFO experiences, and if you read a lot of them from the Edgar Mitchell Foundation, they have like 5,000 abduction cases. They occur in sort of like a dreamlike state. And I think it's possibly like there's definitely connection there with like remote viewing, which also is obviously very contested. But maybe the brain is somewhat like a quantum system, which there is, you know, temporal non-locality, and maybe quantum systems can send information back in time. And maybe you are actually accessing a future memory state. And it's sort of pre-memory, and sort of people maybe with strengthened caudate and putamen or whatever in their basal ganglia who are, you know, have an affinity for remote viewing can do this. And you are witnessing a thing that has a proto-architecture to it that is fundamentally impossible to sort of understand. And you are applying kind of the closest low-level meme based on media and sort of the collective onto the thing. And the thing is affecting you in a way that causes the thing to actually manifest, and
some closed loop.
It's exactly a time loop. And like the Carl Jung, an example of a time loop is Carl Jung had this patient who was super inaccessible, hyper rationalist. As you know, Carl Jung was not rationalist at all. She has a dream of a scarab beetle that is this golden scarab beetle that is gifted to her. This is necklace. And it sort of is this beautiful, her heart opens up and it's sort of this epiphany, and she doesn't know why it represents this in the dream, but she goes to, you know, therapy with Jung, and she says, you know, I don't know what this dream means. You know, this is all sort of gobbledygook. This doesn't make any sense. And as she's saying this, he sees a scarab beetle on the window. So like a live scarab beetle come down on the windowsill. And he sees the scarab beetle, and he like takes the scarab beetle and he gives it to her as a gift. That to me is a causal loop, because she had a pre-memory of something that would happen to her. But that pre-memory required the thing to self-manifest because it changed her attentional pattern and his attentional pattern in a way that caused the thing to actually happen. And so I think might be something around that with the alien thing, where it could be this future, really transformative, exciting thing. You could be ascending to another sort of level at some point.
Does that mean through your intention, you can make the UFOs not appear? So for instance, if you're like, I don't think these are good, like the dark forest idea, and you're like, you know what? Let me place my attention elsewhere. Does that mean that it won't manifest? Or if there's a sufficient amount of people who believe in it, then it will occur for everyone?
I think so. Yeah. That would be my heretical and somewhat scientifically baseless belief is that collectively we have much more kind of thought power in terms of manifesting things than people sort of realize.
If you enjoyed this toe clipping, then the full video is linked in the description. You should also sign up for Toe Mail, which is again in the description and the pinned comment. You'll receive immediate access to all exclusive updates from the Theories of Everything podcast. It also helps me communicate directly with the core toe community. You'll also receive my top 10 toes. Think of it as the intellectual version of Quentin Tarantino's Obsession.